Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Cinema Savvy. My name is Tate. It is hot. It is very, very hot today. It is, in fact, 27 degrees in my room, and we're here once again to discuss Doctor Who, the finale of season 1 in brackets 2024 of Doctor Who. I'm joined by what is the usual kind of Who gang for this series. So we've got both Sam and Aaron. Say hi, both of you. How are we doing?
Hello. Very good. As Tate said, very warm. I got sunburnt this weekend, hence why I look like a lobster. But I also had a haircut, so I'm also got a debut in my short hair. So yeah, all fun.
Yeah, I'm all good. I'm just sweating a lot, and my ears are ruined from the weekend, but I'm good.
Good. Yes, as is every hot day on the channel, I have the Dalek spinning in the background, making sure that, the room is patrolled and everything like that. We have not just an episode to discuss, but we have pretty much an entire series to have a quick kind of run over for. Because we have now had the Return of Doctor Who's series done. Ncuti's first series as the Doctor, Millie's first series as a companion. So we'll talk about the episode itself, The Empire of Death. And we'll also talk about how it fit in with the rest of the series, what we think of it as a whole, and just kind of general thoughts about it. Today we're going in with a chronological approach to the episode. A little bit less muddled than last week where we kind of darted around and talked about different elements of it. We're literally just going to go through the chronological kind of timings of the episode, go through everything that happens, and just discuss it as we've done throughout the entire kind of weeks of the show. And everything like that. It was a shame that we weren't able to get Neil on, who was also on the reviews at some point in this series, but just scheduling conflicts and everything like that. But, we've got a Christmas special that's going to be coming out Christmas. And we've got another series next year, which I'm sure we'll get, the whole gang back together for, and we'll get as many kind of people on discussing it when it comes around. So let's start with kind of the end. The end of The Legend of Ruby Sunday, we're left with the reveal that Sutekh, the god of death, is going to be the main villain of the series. He is the one who waits, and he is bringing his gift of death to the entire universe. We have Susan Twist as a character, Susan Triad, who basically gets turned into a kind of a follower of Sutekh. We also get Harriet Arbinger, the reveal at Unit as well, and the reveal of Sutekh clinging onto the TARDIS. Now, we have many theories about where this would go. In the end, we actually get many child labor breaches for, kids with Segway guns and everything like that. But basically, Unit tries to shoot the problem, as Unit always do, and Unit fails at shooting the problem. So we get kind of quite poetic deaths for all of the kind of characters there at Unit. The Doctor managed to escape with Mel, and they meet up with Ruby and basically try and get out from there. But I'd say probably the start of this episode is probably the strongest part of this episode, actually. I really enjoyed the opening to it. I was gripped from the start. So what did you both think of kind of, where we left off from the last episode and how it led into this episode?
I mean, I think we were worried a little bit that this episode would ultimately be similar to the last of the Time Lords, and that there would just be a reset and it would be fine. I mean, just jump into a bit close to the end, it does seem like people do remember that something's happened to them, that they were escaping. So it doesn't seem like it's a full memory wipe or anything like that. But I think once I saw the Unit regulars go, and then Carla and Cherry and Mrs. Flood, it was like, okay, well, this is just not, it can't be. I thought the way it was done was really well. I mean, I was really looking forward to the Doctor and Mel zooming through London. And just kind of seeing this sand attack. It sounds like a Pokemon move, because it is. Just like engulf everything. But no, I thought it led into it really well. I know some people were kind of criticizing it a little bit, being like, oh, well, you could have had the cliffhanger here, you could have had the cliffhanger here. But I mean, ultimately, I think it was the right place to end it last time. And I think really to just go straight into this episode, I think was a good call. And again, I'm happy that Mel was along for this as well. Obviously, she has a little bit of a different type of role later on. But to see kind of that mix of classic and new together. The Segway guns was a little bit... I mean, I keep seeing that video pop up on Twitter now because Unit puts guns into everything. the Brigadier's cane was one of my favorite things from Sarah Jane Adventures. So yeah, I'm glad that it resumes, but it's still like, why? And also, why? What was Rose doing on her tablet? That is the thing that I really want to know.
I think she was controlling the big guns.
That's what I was thinking, but now I've seen a lot of. She was playing Flash Bird. She was playing singing into just a lot of stuff. Yeah, overall, I think it was a really effective opening. Yeah.
I like to think she was frantically trying to send a PDF or an email and was just like, shit. Yeah, no, I've funnily enough seen similar things online where people are like, oh, the cliffhanger should have been all of them disintegrating and not where it ended in the previous one. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I can see the positives of if they did one thing, but I'm also seeing the positives of them doing it the way they did, because it means having the episode start with everyone dying and Mel and the Doctor on the scooter, I think is just more of an exhilarating start to the episode. Yeah, I'm going to probably say this later as well, but for the entire first half of this episode, I absolutely adored everything from the way that the stakes just keep getting piled on top of each other to the point where it's I can't really think of a recent season finale for Doctor Who that's done this, but in terms of the stakes being raised from part 1 into a part 2, this is probably one of the most dire situations I can think of that has happened. I know sometimes it can get to the point where it's like the world's in danger yet again, but in terms of literally everyone's dead, this is quite an extreme, in terms of the stakes anyway, it does feel quite extreme. And I really like the fact that they just carries over perfectly from the end of the first part where everything was just being raised on top of each other. And yeah, I just really like that first half. And yeah, the whole them trying to shoot the problems away, it's never going to work. It's never worked before. It doesn't work here. Kate needs to learn. It's never going to work. It's just not going to happen.
You'd think for the many years that UNIT have been around in Doctor Who, even in universe in Doctor Who, the amount of times they've been mentioned, and the fact that, they would surely have at some point the information that, Sutekh was there at first at UNIT House, right? The Pyramids of Mars is set at UNIT House just at the wrong time period.
Yeah.
Surely they would have had records, or the Doctor would have mentioned something. Oh yeah, I fought a god literally in the building that you currently work at. You maybe want to, keep that on record on how to maybe beat him if he comes back at any point or anything like that. But UNIT shooting down the problems. I've seen some people confused online about Kate's mention of Birds Will Sing Again, but that is, for me, it was quite clear straight away. Kind of birdsong, I've always kind of recognized the media as a form of kind of new life, and they used it in Avengers Endgame as well, didn't they? When the first thing to come back when Hulk snaps is the birds come back, and you can hear birdsong and everything like that. So it's one of those things that I immediately got, and some people online have been confused by that. Anyway, we get a confrontation with Sutekh and his disciples in the time window. The Doctor basically vows to defeat him, but Sutekh won't attack or go for a kill because he still hasn't figured out who Ruby is. I wasn't a big fan of that, as far as motivation for it and stuff like that. This is a person who doesn't really care about life at all. So why on earth would the mystery of Ruby cause him to not kill them on the spot when he's given the opportunity? If he's truly the god of all death, then surely he would want to just, get it out the way, especially knowing that the Doctor is a Time Lord and can regenerate. He'd want to put something in place so that wouldn't happen, or, pin him or trap him like he had done, in Pyramids of Mars. I was a little bit confused as to why he didn't immediately do that. And I guess for the sake and the purpose of the plot, as it later goes on, they kind of say, oh, well, the mystery is there, and, that's the whole reason and motivation. But I could never fully get on board with that, especially knowing the character is literally out there to kill people. And maybe you guys have different opinions on that for yourselves, but I felt like that scene in the time window, it would have been better if it was kind of a, Sutek's coming. I don't even want to negotiate. I've just got to run and get out of there, instead of it being more of like an exposition dump and kind of a little bit of information to lead to a solution to beating him.
I mean, I do agree mostly with that, to be honest. I think the whole thing with Sutek this time is that he's evolved since the last meeting, and that he is more all powerful than he ever was, and we see the effects of that before that scene even happens. So the idea that that he's not able to kind of go through with killing the Doctor or just kind of getting rid of everyone is a little bit of a questionable thing, especially when you then think about, okay, how long Sutek has been with the Doctor. There's been so many moments where the Doctor has been on the edge of something, where either the universe is ending or the Doctor's life is severely in danger, and everything in between. And nothing's happened. And yet it's only really because of Ruby that Sutek now said, like, well, wait a minute, we need to figure this out right before. And it's like, well, you had all these years, and I think that's my issue with kind of Sutek returning the way he's been brought back, and kind of the exposition about when he joined up. Had it been around Wild Blue Yonder or anything around there, I feel like it would have just made more sense. You could get away with, he just came back, he couldn't really he was still like getting power, and then Ruby came in, and by the time that mystery came out, it's like, okay, we can't do that. I need to figure out this mystery. But even then, to me, that doesn't warrant not doing anything. And I think that kind of carries this whole story. That's kind of, it's like a knife above this story. Like, it's always there, and I can't not think about it. And that's kind of the first thing that really kind of threw me off with this, because I mean, like Aaron, I had a great time with this beginning. And I think there's certain scenes across this episode which are excellent, but the overarching things just kind of make it fall a bit flat.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It does. I mean, again, I'll probably reiterate this later, but the setup of everything feels more intriguing and investing than the actual payoff. And that's not to say the payoff's bad in this episode. It's more just a case of, and again, I'll probably say this later, but everything sort of feels a little bit rushed. Like, some of the ideas we get to later in the episode are really solid ideas, but again, it's just the execution does feel a bit like they're just trying to wrap things up as quickly as possible. And again, with the whole Sutek thing, it does, the whole confrontation I really like, but then there's, again, and this kind of seems to be a recurring theme this season, is that there are certain things that are mentioned which, and I was saying this before we started going live anyway, but there's certain things where it's like, initially you're like, oh yeah, I'm on board with that, that's a really cool idea. But then when you think about it in the long term, like, context, it's actually like, oh, hang on a second, that it either doesn't quite add up, or it kind of just makes things a little bit off that have previously happened before Shooty's season. Again, the whole thing of Sutek being attached to the TARDIS for all this time. I will admit, the image of him just clinging on in the void, the vortex, I thought it was pretty cool at first, but the more I watch it, the more it's actually kind of funny. I don't know why. It's just kind of a funny, like, image of a dog just hanging on to the outside of the TARDIS.
You mean something like this? That kind of situation there. With
the amount of memes I've seen in, like, the last couple days. Like, the funniest one I think I saw was, like, the end of The Big Bang from season 5, where the TARDIS literally kind of explodes, and there's just like a speech bubble coming from the explosion going, one day I'm going to get you for this.
There's been so many criticisms and memes that kind of go hand in hand based off of that whole thing, and it's one of those things where when you're watching the episode, you're going, yeah, sure, yeah, Russell, yeah, keep cooking, Russell, here we go, we're building something. But then after the episode, you're like, oh, what was going on there? what was that thought process? I know this is I don't even know if it's a soft reboot. They've recalled it season 1, yet they brought back a complete classic villain. So it's not really a reboot. It's more of kind of a continuation, just a fresh start off point. But the idea of Sutekh hanging on to the TARDIS throughout all of time and space for every adventure post, Pyramids of Mars is crazy. The amount of things that the TARDIS has been through, whether it's Trenzalore, whether it's, just there's so many different things. The power of, was it not the power of the Doctor? That's the one that I showed the image from. The 50th anniversary special where the 3 Doctors come together with their 3 TARDISes. Is that 3 Suteks just hanging around? People have even questioned it from more recent, as in The Giggle. The TARDIS gets hit with a hammer and becomes 2 TARDISes. Does that mean there's 2 Suteks? What's going on? Like, it's one of those writing things which is like, and people have commented on Russell T Davies doing this in the past, writing himself into a corner and not being able to write himself out of it. Now, I quite like his finales. I think the only one that doesn't fully fit is Last of the Time Lords. I think all the others, he does a decent enough job, and it's a fun enough story to follow. But this is probably his weakest one, which is a shame because it's been a good series. There's been, of course, Space Babies at the start as the Duff episode. I'd say that the Devil's Chord was okay, and then all the others have been better than average. I'd say it's been a good series, but like you both said, this finale seems very rushed, and the ideas behind it don't seem to quite fit. I actually have a comment here from Neil, because I chatted with Neil afterwards as well to see what his thoughts on the episode, and he says he's still unsure on the episode. It started out really well, but he felt like it rushed with things wrapping up. Almost feel like it needed another episode to give enough time to both Sutekh and Ruby, which, I mean, begs the question, because I had it ever since watching the finale. Did this need to be a 3-parter? I know it's a short series, but I've been thinking about it, and having the original final point of the episode being where it was works. Then spending an episode, instead of people dying immediately at the start of the episode, having an episode of people fighting Sutekh and trying to escape. Different stories showing every single kind of person trying to escape, try and fight Sutekh, but in the end they cannot get away. End of the episode, the Doctor has the conversation with Sutekh, they get into the memory TARDIS, and then they fly off and they try and figure it out from there. I've seen people discuss that online. I personally would prefer that, give it a bit more time, but we know from this season everything's been squidged in together. We've got no filler episodes, we've got no kind of, time to breathe. It is just a quick bang, 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 bang. And I mean, it's over now. We've got no more episodes. It's such a short series. But yeah, we've talked about Sutekh's confrontation. Did anyone else want to kind of comment on that quickly before we move on?
It was more so, it's a little bit jarring in a way, because we have this short season, we've got kind of these episodes which do go at a pretty decent pace, and then we got some really good dialogue exchanges in these last 2 episodes, because it's a 2-part. It's allowed to just breathe a bit easier, and that's the jarring thing, because they're great, and it feels like we're not then given anything from it afterwards. It's like we have these great character moments of things that actually allow us to kind of see things a little bit clearer, get a little bit of more of a different person's perspective, and it just then is then quickly kind of sorted out. And whether or not it would be a 3-parter, I don't know, but just in any case, to get something a bit more evenly spaced out, because I think a lot of this episode in particular, especially in the middle, has some slower moments, the conversations, and then the wrap up is just like that, and it then affects what you think about the villain. Because I'm like, okay, that was a really kind of somewhat simple solution, despite all of this kind of really hard hitting, terrible stuff that's gone on. And I think that's kind of where I kind of then you can't even enjoy the fun of it, because and kind of the hilarity of some of the visuals as well, because it just goes from we don't know what to do to actually there was a secret plan, we handled that, and that's that.
Yeah, no, I'm I'm pretty much in agreement, and I kind of agree with what you said, Tate, is that I feel like not necessarily a whole middle section of them fighting against Sutekh, but just a long enough period of time to kind of really drive home and emphasize how desperate the situation is, because that's kind of why I love the first half of the episode so much. Pretty much everything up to the point where they head to 2046, up to that point, I loved it because you got to see a bit of that. You got to see just how bad things were. That scene of the Doctor screaming out of the TARDIS is like one of my favorite moments of the entire series, because I just believed the pain he was in. And I wanted more of that. And unfortunately, because the episode is, I mean, it's the longest episode of the series, but it's still either could have been a little bit longer, or again, having a third part squeezed in the middle would have helped, just giving a bit more time. And that's actually one thing that I would say The Last of the Time Lords actually does better at than this
It's a
episode.
3-part finale.
Yeah, it's a 3-part finale. You had 2 previous episodes of setup, which allows that final part to spend a good 80 to 90% of it following Martha through the literal hellscape that the world's been turned into, and you do believe it more because you get to spend a good chunk of that episode with Martha going around, and the world is literally unrecognizable and things are incredibly desperate, and you really believe it. And it's not till the last 5 to 10 minutes where things come to a head and everything gets resolved. Whereas this episode, it's like very evenly split in half. The first half is seeing that desperation, and then the second half is them everything just trying to quickly wrap it up, and then all the conclusion of the stuff that's been set up in previous episodes. And I feel like that's where this episode falls short. When it delves into that desperation and things being as bad as it can be, I was gripped. But we didn't get enough of it to fully sell the severity of the situation. Like, again, the Doctor screaming out the TARDIS is great, but that's just one moment out of a whole episode. They could have really done with dragging that out. I don't know how they could have dragged it out, and especially with it being a cinema release, they could have even made it like a feature-length episode. They did that with the Power of the Doctor, and that worked. And I feel like they could have done something similar here, just to kind of stretch out that middle section that really could have helped.
Yeah,
I don't know, just sell it a bit more.
I agree, especially with a series that is shorter, 1, and 2, didn't have any 2-parters in it. This is the only 2-parter we get this series, and we're saying, no, we needed more from this story. That's crazy. That's not good pacing as far as, either episode is concerned. If when you combine them both together, you're still wanting, more from it. It doesn't give you enough of kind of everything and rushes through everything. So, I mean, personally for me, I think Legend of Ruby Sunday was one of the strongest of the series and was really well paced and built up to that amazing kind of cliffhanger. But then after the cliffhanger, I felt whilst watching this episode, apart from the opening scenes where people started dying, as soon as everyone started dying, it was like, okay, so it's getting reset then at the end of the episode. All the tension goes, and a lot of people have had that as well. Even though I do feel like those scenes are some of the best acted in the episode, and of course the Doctor screaming out the TARDIS is a brilliant kind of thing. And, this is once again the Doctor who has been healed and probably feels a lot more than the other Doctors, isn't scarred by the Time War anymore, is kind of there for living life. So it's an interesting kind of state to see the Doctor in and everything like that. We also kind of get to see the memory TARDIS, a collection of a gaggle of things over the years, including every sonic screwdriver that's been in the TARDIS over the years, everything from adventures from classic series to New Who series and everything like that, as kind of a giant Easter egg to anyone who pays enough attention, especially if you watch the Doctor Who Unleashed afterwards, where they kind of go in and have a chat about it, all the different things that go into it. And I will give a shout out as well, because I know Lois, who did that entire section of works on the set of Doctor Who. She did a fantastic job as part of the props department, and really, really fun seeing all those different kind of memories from throughout all the adventures be shown on screen and everything like that. That was nice. I really, really liked that. That's something in Doctor Who which I think anyone can get behind, new or old, because new fans will look at that and go, wow, look at all the adventures that we haven't seen yet. Let's go and explore the kind of the series and see kind of what that all means. And old fans are kind of looking at it and going, oh, amazing. We've got that prop there. We've got that thing there from that adventure. So that was a really nice scene. And one thing I want to add to that on top of that, because I'll blend these two sections in together, it was really nice actually over these 2 episodes finally having Mel as an actual companion, you know, back in the TARDIS as an actual member of the team. She brings so much to her performance as Bonnie Langford. Like she's a great actress in the first place, but the fact that, you know, she, you know, is an actual member of the team, has use in this episode. Of course, it turns towards the end, but you need that emotional attachment there, and it's nice to have kind of a classic Who companion, not just brought in as a cameo for the episode. I know they did that back in Jodie Whittaker's kind of final episodes. They had a few kind of the classic companions come back in as a very, very brief cameo, but more of the fact of actually having, you know, her have a purpose in the episode, especially with kind of the high stakes start to the episode, and, you know, having her in the memory TARDIS and there to comfort the Doctor and talk about the invention and everything like that. I really enjoyed those scenes.
Yeah, I mean, the memory TARDIS, I think was something that people had kind of mentioned, it could be involved once they knew about the time window that, oh, this could be how the memory TARDIS from Tales of the TARDIS gets involved. And the fact that it was a really pleasant surprise, because when I've watched those Tales of the TARDIS episodes, I'm like, oh, it's a really nice thing. It has things not just from classic Who, but from modern Who too. So it really combines everything together, which I love to see. You know, I love the unity of the show rather than segmenting it as it's being throughout most of my life. And now once again with this kind of like soft reboot element. So to have that actually be included, and it actually somewhat makes sense about why that's there and how it's there, I thought was lovely. And of course, you know, I've mentioned Mel last week, and it's been really interesting to kind of really enjoy the character. Like, I liked her to an extent within her actual run on the show. But of course, you know, she didn't have very many episodes because they were cutting back on the episodes back then. And I don't think her character was written very well. So the fact that she's kind of been able to have this kind of a reboot herself and actually, you know, show that, you know, she's not the same person, that, you know, she was comforting the Doctor last episode. She was kind of really, you know, on it. And now she was kind of really taking charge again, you know, to getting the Doctor back to unit, joining him and Ruby in the TARDIS, and kind of, you know, looking back at her adventures with the 6th and 7th Doctor with the items that are in there. It was all just really lovely, and it was just another one of those moments where it's like, all right, we can actually just take a moment to think and talk. And it was just nice to have, you know, that in there, and to see that clip of Bonnie Langford, you know, saying, you know, I wasn't proud of it back then. I wasn't proud, but now, like, I'm proud. And that, you know, is kind of, you know, the cherry on top, I think, if the fact that the actor themselves is going, you know what, I kind of needed this, you know, that makes everything. So it just makes me happy that she's actually been utilized.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And again, that clip from the commentary track actually kind of choked me up a little bit, because the fact that she looked back, and again, this is coming from someone who's not watched much of the classic era, but the fact that she did look back on that original run of her in it not very fondly, and the fact that she is very proud now, is something that I think is quite I don't know what the way to word it, but it's kind of sweet. But yeah, I like the whole idea of a memory TARDIS. It could have gone in a different direction, where it could have been like, oh, I think Chris Chibnall did this once, but like, it was kind of just nostalgia for nostalgia purposes. But it doesn't feel like that, because it's been heavily set up, it's nicely established, and it kind of plays into the narrative nicely as well, especially in the fact that, like, yeah, it's the TARDIS, but it's not quite the TARDIS, so it's going to break. It's not quite fully functioning, and the fact that it catches on fire within seconds is also. I thought it was quite funny. Just like, oh great, another thing to go wrong for those characters. But yeah, it could have gone one way where it's very nostalgia baity, but I'm glad that they kind of, Russell T Davies kind of verted it into the actual thing of like, no, this is a thing that can actually help them, and it's not just here for nostalgic purposes. It's actually a proper functioning thing that works for the sake of the story. Yeah,
we will bench Mel for a second, then we'll talk about the last human and a spoon, kind of the interaction that happens there.
That sounds like the bad setup for a joke.
It was it was a nice moment in the episode, but on reflection, I know that metal is apparently a scarce thing on this barren landscape of the world and everything like that. I have to question how the Doctor knew that he would get metal from this person. And at the same time, I do have to question kind of, of course, why this interaction was needed. Like, it was a nice interaction. It was a nice bit of dialogue. It was kind of good to kind of get that whole thing of, people are dying across their generations and everything like that. But we kind of learned that anyway from, from Mel later on within the episode. So I don't know. I think this interaction was probably the only bit of filler in the entire episode, but it was nice filler, if that made sense.
Mm.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I enjoyed it. I think the performances here were great. And I thought, yeah, it was very sad. Like I came out of that scene being like, oh, that's really and I think at least that added some weight to the whole thing. And I kind of just wish we'd had that weight with people that we'd actually known as well. I know, in this case, it's just to show that it's affecting more, than we know, and that's totally fair. But I just wish there was a bit more of that, because then I think it makes the actions of the Doctor and Ruby and Mel kind of mean more. And you're right, yeah. So I guess if it was either, some form of old character that we recognized, if it was kind of an alien planet that we'd been to before, just anything to just maybe add to that, and then get the added question, why did this woman, how has everything around her collapsed and she hasn't, and just all that. So I mean, it just adds a few more questions that unfortunately I don't think ever get answered, and maybe I just need to watch it again, have a kind of greater sense of it. But I mean, it was really tragic. I mean, the whole thing with a child is just kind of, it tugged. And that's what I kind of wanted more of, I guess. So yeah, a good scene, really.
Yeah, no, I liked it for what it was going for. But again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is that, like, if we'd had more of that stretching out of just this is how bad things are, and that not necessarily the build up of that, but just seeing that play out, because really it just kind of goes straight from everyone's dead to woman with the spoon, and then you kind of just have to you kind of just have to take that for granted that everything is really bad. Whereas if we'd had something play out a bit more and just drag out, the length of time maybe, or other people's perspectives of this happening, then I feel like it could have had that scene have a bit more weight. I do, like I said, I do really like the scene for what it is going for, but it just feels not necessarily out of place, but not necessarily. It just feels a little bit unearned. If we'd had a bit more of that setup in terms of like, this is how bad things are. Oh, and here's an example of it with the woman with the spoon. And again, like Sam said, it just raises more questions, because you'd kind of presume that as soon as Sutek did what he did, everyone died instantly. So how comes this woman is still here in a tent? Like, what makes her special, and how did she survive it? And it just it's the beauty with season one. It just raises more.
Where
questions.
are they as well?
Yeah,
There's so many questions there from this scene. Then we get kind of a somewhat solution. The spoon gets used to kind of reboot the time window memory tablet, which will then power the TARDIS, and they're able to figure out that, hey, that Roger Ap Gwilliam person, he took everyone's DNA, and they used 73 yards and the setup from 73 yards as a way for the solution of the episode. It's okay. It's followable. It's not a terrible idea. But this is kind of, for me, where the episode started to go a little bit off the rails slightly. Especially knowing what the solution was in the end to Ruby's mum and everything like that. This is where I started to lose it a bit. The bits which I liked here was kind of Sutek talking to Mel and kind of not possessing her, but tempting her. The temptation of the god of death. Kind of saying, your time's coming soon, Mel. Kind of, I can, you know, I can take hold of you. I need you to stay alive for me to you know, give me information and everything like that. I really like that because it turns a companion into something very dangerous, especially if the Doctor is unaware. And that's something like in the previous episode with the TARDIS becoming suddenly something quite dangerous. A companion like Mel, who we just kind of been reintroduced back into as being a good part of the episode so far, is suddenly dangerous. That's you know, that's a good plot line I can get on board with. But they go back to the memory bank. They get the DNA bank. They get the results. But of course, Mel at that point has turned, and they get kind of brought forward towards Sutek. But everything that happens in the future with the kind of Roger Ap Gwilliam times, what do we think of those entire scenes? Did we like them? For me personally, that's where the episode started to, you know, dip a bit towards the finish. But I want to hear what people think.
Yeah, I mean, the Mel stuff saves it for me. I mean, I feel like on paper, it's kind of a good idea to go, oh yeah, remember that thing, and it, you know, I like when you can kind of utilize information from a previous episode. But I think the difficulty really is that, you know, there's really no recollection of those events happening in sensory yards, and it's kind of like, and oh yeah, the Doctor has this information, so it's like, oh yeah, this and this, and it's like, okay, just, and that's where it feels like the pace is too quick. It's like, all right, cool, they just figured that out. Oh, we'll just go to 2046 and we'll do this, and it's fine. So yeah, for me, that whole kind of section, you know, was a bit flat, but the tension was there because of Mel. And I'm really glad that element was in there. And when Sutek first spoke to her, I was like, oh no. Like, I actually was really fearful. I was like, don't kill Mel. I was like, you know, I feel like me 10 years ago would be like, oh, it's fine, just kill her, it's fine. But now I'm just like, absolutely do not do this. And so I thought that kind of slow build up was really nice. And kind of, I do like a bit afterwards where, you know, and we'll talk a bit later on when the Doctor said, "Oh yeah, I realized that she was gone," at that point, and to me that could have been a really sad moment, which you would think it would be for any Doctor and companion. So yeah, I guess I like that element, but I also don't, because I would have rather the Doctor have had a bit more of a reaction. But no, I think overall the scene with that sequence of events was perfectly fine. I probably would have just wanted a bit more time that would lead up to that point. Maybe a little bit more stuff coming in earlier on, or again, if there was just another episode or a larger middle section, you could have kind of plotted those points in and maybe have Ruby actually remember the full thing, maybe see some flashbacks, and she goes, I don't know why, but it feels like I've been through something, and just kind of, you know, delved into it a bit more.
Yeah, it kind of just goes back to that whole thing of like I think I said this right at the start. It's like the solutions to the problems in this episode, they're not bad solutions. I like some of the solutions, like the memory, the DNA bank, and other things that we'll get to in a bit. But it's just the fact that it's literally straight from one thing to another, and these things are not given time to breathe. That kind of makes it rather hard to take on board necessarily. Like, the solutions are good, it's just you're going straight from Roger Ap Gwilliam to the DNA bank to Mel turning, and it's like, whoa, hang on a minute. Slow down for a second, Russell. We need to kind of do one thing at a time and let these things breathe before you then move on to the next thing, not just one and then another and then another. But that being said, the individual things themselves, I do like. I was a bit worried when they started mentioning Roger Ap Gwilliam, because going back to what I said in a previous stream, is that certain episodes this season, which have worked brilliantly as standalone ones, like Boom, annoyed me a little bit when they started to tie things into, you know, it's snowing or overarching things. Just leave it as its own standalone episode and it will work better for it. Stop introducing these things to it. And I was worried for a second that it was going to do something similar, whereby 73 Yards, for the most part, is the best self-contained episode we've had this season, because there's nothing in, like, leeching in on it. It is just its own thing. And then when they started mentioning him, I was like, okay, 73 yards is now no longer its own thing. It's now important and relevant. But the way I think they handled it here, I thought was probably the best way they could have. And it almost felt reminiscent to season 4, where you get mentions of planets disappearing and the bees disappearing and stars disappearing from the night sky, where it's like breadcrumby sort of led up to, and then that's the payoff. I guess in the sense of what we get in this episode, it felt more like that than what I was dreading, and I'm kind of glad that they went that route. But yeah, it's just the pacing of everything, I think, kind of ruins it. If these things have been given more time to breathe and actually given, not just going, oh, there's a politician, oh, there's a DNA thing, and it just becomes a bit too much. And especially when we get to some of the big reveals right near the end of the episode, it just feels like they're throwing everything in the kitchen sink at you, and you've not really been given much time to process these things. It's just kind of happening very quickly.
So we then have the solution just kind of presented to us, which is we need to take death for walkies through the time vortex, is the best way of putting it. They come up with a plan. Doctor knows that Mel is dead, so hatches a plan that he's going to use the Mavity glove and, a piece of rope, which is from kind of, the church on Ruby Road. So it brings it back around to the Christmas special with those things being used to basically, take Sutek for walkies, stick it on his collar, drag it into the TARDIS and rip him through time and space. This was dumb, and I was genuinely laughing at this as a solution, especially when the initial solution is so clever for defeating Sutek and is iconic as it within Doctor Who lore of, he can't actually like properly kill him, so he has to kind of, contain him kind of situation. And the fact that this solution is, oh yeah, we're gonna rip him through time and space, but wasn't he, like clinging onto the TARDIS anyway? He's been through the time vortex. The only difference is now he's not actually touching the TARDIS. He's just kind of attached by a bit of rope. They bring death across all of time and space to death. They bring back all the planets that they mentioned, hopefully including Gallifrey, so we can have stories back there, hopefully including Skaro, because they name dropped Skaro, so we can bring that back. And also, of course, the Oods planet was mentioned as well, so maybe we'll get a reappearance of them. But for me, this was not it. This was not it. This is where the point in Doctor Who where sometimes it's so silly and goes almost too over the top that you just have to laugh at it. And I've seen people who really enjoyed this way of kind of defeating Sutek. I've seen people who have actively despised it. I'm in the middle where I can watch it and go, okay, that's how the series ends. I can laugh at this. Like this is silly, but it's Doctor Who. You just get on with it, kind of thing. And it gives the universe a mini little reset, which is fine because it means we can move on to hopefully more and better things as this fresh kind of set of episodes come out. But what did you guys think of the solution to defeating Sutek?
I wasn't offended by it, but I knew people would be, and that was kind of like, okay. The death is death. I like as a concept. I think it's a clever thing to do. Like, let's use death against what they've already done, and I think that does add things. What has death now allowed to happen? What life is it given because of this action? And I hope that this surprises because of that. Like whether it's a Gallifrey or Skaro, or whether it's potential characters or anything, I think it just allows you to do that. And I think using a god like Sutek is probably one of the only ways that you could do that and actually go, well, you know what? Yeah, I can understand it's not just a random retcon or anything like that.
It might be to reset the flux.
I'm not going to go that far, but I feel like Gallifrey would be enough for me. Whenever it's fine. But yeah, the way that it was done, I liked Susan and Mel being these weird, and Harriet as well, like in their hooded garments and like
yeah,
those kind of like
such cool kind of villain costumes, and
like the visuals of that were really cool. And it was just the fact that it was so simple in execution. And it does make you think how long that kind of frustrates them, the pacing issue, because it goes, right, okay, well, it became this after however much time has gone by. Clearly a good amount of time has gone by between them escaping Earth and then coming back. And yeah, it just wasn't the best thing. And I didn't laugh. I was a bit like, okay, this is where it's going. He is going for a walk. It's fine. This all-powerful Sutak is now being dragged through the vortex, which, again, a concept that I think on paper sounds great, but the visuals just a little bit laughable and in some senses hilarious. And I don't think that should be the intent, especially when you bring a character of that magnitude back. Like, it'd be like, okay, let's drag the master through the vortex. Come on. It's just a bit too weird, and again, fun in some ways, but I think, as a piece of now Doctor Who history, I don't think it stands up compared to a lot of other finales or just stories in general. And I think that's the real shame, because I kind of feel like this concept of a story, this idea, deserved a little bit of a better conclusion than that. So even though I think the actual way that Sutek basically saves the universe, that's good. I really like that, but maybe the path that got Sutek there could have just been done better.
Yeah, I'm pretty much just going to echo what you both said. I think the ideas are strong. It's just the execution looks a bit goofy. And it just, I don't know. It's like the initial idea is good, but, and I saw a few people commenting this online as soon as the episode was dropped on iPlayer, which is the fact that, considering he's been given so much build up throughout the series, considering he was built up to be such a bad, like, big threat in the first part, and this is how he goes out, it just feels, I guess the best word to put it is anticlimactic, is because it just, this series has gone so much out of its way to make him such a big deal. And again, if we just had a bit more time to kind of understand the severity of the situation with the time passing, because like you said, Sam, I didn't really, it didn't quite add up in the episode how much time had specifically passed, which kind of made things a bit hard to grasp a little bit, because you just kind of presume while watching the episode that everything's just kind of happened in a very quick succession, which it hasn't. But it kind of feels that way when you're watching it. And the fact that this big bad god of death gets defeated in probably the simplest way possible is not necessarily the issue I have. It's the fact that it all happens very suddenly, and we're not given much time. And I even saw people commenting as, like, considering he was built up to be such a big villain, we don't really spend much time with him in this episode to really get an idea of how scheming he can be or how big of a threat he can be. It's literally just a case of everyone dies, the Doctor and Mel and Ruby go away, and then we're kind of with them for the majority of the episode, and it cuts back to Sutek only a few other times in very small places. And we don't really get an idea of how big of a threat he is outside of the fact that he's killed everyone. There's got to be something more to that. There's got to be something, again, we do see him scheming, but a bit more of that would have been great. But it literally is just a case of everyone dies. We get a few moments and then he's defeated. And it kind of feels very lackluster in that sense. Again, the solution isn't necessarily the problem. It's just how very quickly it happens. And the fact that we've just gone straight from point A to point B with not very little context is like, I don't know. It just doesn't sit right. I like certain things about it, but there's something that just doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah, I agree. And it just goes with the episode felt rushed kind of theme that we've been going with for this thing, that they weren't able to come up with a solution that was maybe a bit more complex or complicated or would have fitted in the rest of the series. And that goes in line with kind of the whole premise of the episode in the first place. You know, we've already made jokes about Sutek kind of, you know, clinging onto the TARDIS throughout all of the adventures and being there for various different things and various different events the TARDIS would have been through. Something as as simple as recently the giggle. There are two kind of TARDISes in that episode at the end. Does that mean there's two Suteks? And will Sutek make a return from something like that with an action that is something like that in the episode?
I would have believed that, because I saw a couple theories before the finale where, like, oh, did 15 hitting the TARDIS with the hammer therefore bring Sutek back? And like things like that would have made a bit more logical sense than, oh no, he's just been hanging onto the TARDIS this whole time. And then it just makes things from previous seasons add an extra level of complication that wasn't initially there, and it just makes things a bit like, oh, hang on a minute, wait, what?
When you're writing, and when you're a writer like Russell T Davies, who has worked with Doctor Who before and has trod on eggshells to make sure that he doesn't rewrite the history of the show, especially when the biggest complaint from the most recent series before he took back over was the fact that Chris Chibnall decided to completely rewrite the history of the show, is that you don't do that. It's the longest running sci-fi show, going. It's a show that's beloved by thousands, millions of people across the globe. Jesus, the fact that it's gone across the continent this year, like full time, and it's being kind of pitched for Disney Plus and everything like that. When you've got fans of a show like this who are ready to, of course, praise it where it's praised, but pick it apart whenever you get into the kind of the gritty details of it and everything like that, you cannot be doing something like that, which changes drastically the entire kind of, idea of, every episode that's come before it. The whole point of Sutek just kind of gaining his power, but also being there ever present for every single moment makes no sense. And the solution being that simple, when he's been in the time vortex for that long and has survived and lived and kind of gotten stronger, is too easy of a solution. So maybe they'll fix that later on. Maybe it'll get readdressed. We see him disintegrate in the time vortex, or is that him just kind of, getting placed somewhere, into the void, maybe again? Who knows? I mean, he's a god. He can pretty much survive anything. He's last of the Osirians, so who knows whether he'll make a return or not. Anyway, the conclusion of the episode also came with the reveal that Ruby Sunday's mum is no one. A big wah disappointing kind of moment, which is really fascinating because when I first watched The Last Jedi, which had Rey's parents as no one, I was really happy with that solution. I was really unhappy with this solution of Ruby's mum being no one of importance, because it made no sense as to why. A couple of things. Why is it always snowing whenever Ruby thinks about her mum or thinks about Ruby Road? What was her mum pointing at? Her mum was pointing at a sign that said Ruby Road to no one. She was pointing to she was pointing to the Doctor, but why did the thing change? There's so many different things that just don't add up or don't make sense. Why they couldn't find her DNA, why they couldn't find her. And they go, because she was good at climate. No, there's modern sciences and stuff like that, even at this time. We don't need, Roger Ack Williams' kind of, arsenal of, DNA records to be able to find the right person. It's, baffling kind of end to that story. But, Russell T did actually say there's more to it. That's not the end of it. He hasn't given us all of the information yet. So, unless you're watching behind the scenes, you've got to take it at face value, and that's got to be a bit disappointing.
I think this is when I have an issue with some of the overarching stuff, which I've mentioned before. I'll mention it again. I think if you're actively leading something, fine. But this is when I kind of feel like you need to go with a more breadcrumb approach. If it was leading something in this season, then yeah, go for it. Really kind of make us feel like we need to know this information. But I feel like we've got a lot of stuff kind of hinted towards us, and then it's like, okay, well, you're not going to get that for another season. It's a bit like okay, you just kind of really trying to keep us engaged by doing it. And had it just been small little things here and there that didn't take up basically half of Ruby's screen time is this, when we could have developed the character a little bit more, and then actually, just pulled it out a little bit, and whether or not we would have got the 13 episodes at least, would that have helped? But it just feels like we've wasted some time here when it could have gone to really developing the Ruby character, the relationship with the Doctor, their kind of, journeys together, by putting a lot of focus on this when half of it still isn't answered. We get the whole snow thing so early on, and it's referenced throughout the entirety of the season, and yet there's no mention of it really in the final episode at all, outside of the time window. So it's just kind of like, when is it going to be answered? And I kind of don't really want to know in the next season. I want to be looking at kind of the adventures that they're going on, and the new companion, and kind of everything that's going to happen. So that's kind of my main issue with that. The actual kind of reveal of the mum, I didn't mind so much, because I thought the way it was done was lovely. But again, it's how did all of this stuff not work yet this work? In Boom, realistically, there should have been a match there, and I would believe that they would have records there to do that. How did Davina McCall and that team not find out? People were saying that, well, she's an NHS nurse as well, so of course she's going to have records, out there. So it's very weird. I don't mind, someone being kind of just normal and not being, super special because of a bloodline or anything, as long as it's not kind of a bait and switch. And, I don't like the subverting expectations kind of excuse for a lot of things. I was like, no, you've done all this and now you're just going back on it to do something else. I would have rather have Ruby gone through a more inner kind of battle, being like, I want to know who I am, but I'm also really scared to find out where I come from and why that's possible. And maybe the arc of the series is her, coming to a conclusion, this is what I want to know, and then her just finding that out, and that being a nice story for a companion that doesn't involve, villainous things out there and thinking, oh, could this be involved? Could this be involved? Just go, no, this is an average person's kind of thoughts on things. So yeah, as lovely as the scene was when she, found her mom, and, I thought that was really special of a scene to have just after the scene with Sutak in a vortex. It kind of goes, okay, maybe again, we need a bit more time with this, or maybe this could have been done a bit differently. So yeah, it's a weird mixed bag.
Yeah, I'm pretty much going to agree with everything Sam said. I really liked the sentiment of it when they revealed it, because again, that whole idea of her not being anyone important, but just the idea that she could be, was the strong thing that kept it going. I really liked that. But then it's another one of those things where, the more you think about it in hindsight, the more questions it raises. As much as the sentiment is there, it does raise a few questions, like, why the hell did she point at the sign? It seems a bit weird that she would just point at a sign just to name her child for the time window thing, and why is she wearing a hooded cloak? And it just makes certain things not add up that much. I get the initial the initial idea and the reason for it and the concept, but it's just when you think about it in the long run, it just makes certain things, you just start questioning certain things. Again, the whole thing with the DNA, you'd think that would be something that would have rectified it sooner, but again, it just makes no sense. But it funnily enough, I did see a really funny tweet that kind of best summed this up, where it took the line from the end of the episode where Ruby goes, my mom, I was named after a road, and then the mum responds with just like, oh, good for you, love, I named my baby Lamppost. And I was like, yeah, that sums everything up.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a, I don't know, it's a weird one. It really is a weird one. And again, the way it just kind of gets all wrapped up nicely, really suddenly and really quickly, just felt a bit, it didn't feel earned, despite the fact that they've built up built the whole thing up since Christmas. I've never really had that with anything like that before, where like they've built it up for so long, but then the payoff happens, and it's like, no, you didn't, you didn't earn that. And again, watching the commentary track, the Russell T Davies's reasoning behind it was his reaction to Rey's heritage in the Star Wars sequels, and his reason for doing that was this. I get the intent, but when you hear his reasoning, it sounds a little bit petty. It's like, oh, I can do it better than them. And it kind of just comes off a little bit more, not half-assed. It just comes a little bit more, all over the place.
People can hate on Last Jedi as much as you want to. Over the years, ever since watching it for the first time, I've actually come around to it a bit more, and I feel like that reveal of Rey's parents for that film alone is fine, which gets destroyed by what happens later on. But if he is following the same kind of thing, and we're going to get a Rise of Skywalker kind of season afterwards where, oh, actually, hold on, she is special. There is a reason why, and we'll get further explanations, because apparently, even though Mrs. Flood says the story's over, Russell T says the story is not over with that family. Speaking of, we get Mrs. Flood doing her best Stay Another Day impression, and leading us into the Christmas episode by saying, oh, yeah, Ruby's fine. Doctor, ooh, not good, is a summary of the words that she says. We still don't know what her character is. We still don't know kind of what her plans are for the series. I'm sure that she will be part of the Christmas special or even the main villain of the next series, but she started to show her villainous tendencies like kind of in the last 2 episodes, and I'm quite liking where they're taking the character. Be interesting to see where we go with her. Would anyone else like to make a comment before we kind of move on to the finale about Anita Dobson and kind of her role in Who going forwards?
I mean, I'm her biggest fan. If Mrs. Flood has one fan, it's me. I am so invested. I said to my family like the day after, I was like, I just would be fine with her appearing in every episode, and I would be down. I think she's so funny. She's creepy. Her delivery is amazing. I love her, and I'm still so perplexed as to who she could be and what her actual purpose is. I know we've toyed with, could she be a Time Lord? People like, oh, could she be the Rani? There's been a lot of talk about her clothes recently, that she's dressed like Clara, she's dressed like Romana from the classic series, that she's had a puffer jacket like, a gilet like Rory and all of that. And it's like, okay, well, could she be an amalgamation of things? Or the Rani did dress up as Mel in Sylvester McCoy's first story. So, I think that's got a little bit of legs. Could she be something different? Could she be a narrator entity or something? I know I mentioned, did I mention last week about maybe one of the Guardians? Could she be the White Guardian? I don't know. I think there's so many things up in the air in that, but as long as she returns, I don't care. This is when I feel like she's more of a kind of a breadcrumb thing where she's not had too much of an appearance. But I feel like, that's because she's not this finale wasn't her reveal. There's more to it. So as much as I hoped we got more, I'm excited for the prospects of more of her.
I don't really have much to add when it comes to Mrs. Flood, other than the fact that I was intrigued by her character to begin with when she first appeared in the Christmas special. But the more she's appeared, and again, it's nothing against Anita Dobson or the character itself, it's just the way it's presented. The more she's appeared, the more it's actually kind of annoyed me a little bit, because I'm just like, there's only so long you can keep dragging things out and teasing stuff to the point where it actually gets not intriguing, but actually kind of frustrating a little bit. Throughout this whole series, I've given all the teasers to stuff the benefit of the doubt, like, oh, that's going to be paid off later. Oh, that's going to be paid off later. Oh, that's going to be paid off later. Whereas this is something where I'm like, even when it first appeared, it's like, we're not going to know about this for quite a while. And again, seeing all the theories online has been quite interesting, and I mean, at this rate, because I don't really know much about the Rani and the classic era characters that have been mentioned, I don't know if I can 100% attach myself to those theories, but I do like the idea of what some of these could have been. And apparently, I can't remember where someone got this from, but someone after the episode aired, someone pointed out online that it's either in a deleted scene or you see it for like a very minute split second in the actual episode, is that she has a briefcase or like a suitcase, and on that suitcase is stickers that reference to each of the, like, I think there's a Manhattan sticker that references to Rory and Amy. There's a sticker of the Orient Express, which is for Clara. There's another one that references Ace, and I wasn't even aware of this. And again, I've not seen the deleted scene that this is from. I can't see it in the actual episode. I can't remember if it pops up in Unleashed. I don't think it does. But someone pointed this out, and it perfectly backs up the whole thing of her wearing companions' outfits. But again, for context of like who she could be, I don't know where it quite fits in. But again, I don't know. I don't really have much to say other than that. But it's interesting seeing where she could go. But again, at this rate, I'm just kind of not annoyed by it. I'm just like, I would rather know sooner rather than later.
That is absolutely fair. So I'm gonna stick both of you on the spot. In the chat, I've put down all the episodes. We're at the end of the season, which means I'm gonna ask you to rank them. I'll go first with mine. I'm proper on the spot because I've literally just given you the episodes. I'll go through my ranking. We're not including. We could include Church on Ruby Road in there, just because it kind of fills out the series as it's the whole story. We'll include Church on Ruby Road as well. So I'm going to throw that in probably there. So I'm just put Church, just so I know. Okay, so here is my ranking. So in last place, Space Babies, because honestly, if there was a lower than last place for this list, it would go there. What an awful kind of start to the series. I know that you got the Church as well, but what a terrible episode. Especially with the writing that came afterwards. I'd actually put Empire of Death as my second least favorite of the series. The reason being is every single episode I've gone and watched again. And it's not just for kind of the sake of the review. I've gone and watched it again because I've wanted to watch it again, including episodes like Devil's Cord, which I watched again immediately, but I didn't watch Space Babies again. I didn't want to watch Empire of Death again. It was one of those feelings like, I've seen the story. I don't really want to watch it again immediately. I'll probably watch it again this week at some point, but it wasn't an immediate kind of priority with some of the other episodes where I watched it again that same day. So, you know, it hadn't affected me immediately. Then I've got The Devil's Cord. It's an okay episode. There were some things which I like in the episode, some things which I don't like. But, you know, it's a decent episode in there. Then I've got Church. It's a good Christmas episode. It was fun. It was a good introduction to Shooty as the Doctor, and you know, good introduction to Millie Gibson as Ruby. Set up a lot of the mysteries for the series, so it's a good setup episode in general. Has a lot of payoff when you actually think about the Empire of Death, and has a lot of payoff throughout the series as well for the mysteries that get done. Then I've got Rogue. Just because we never actually found out if the rogue was a shoulder, as you know,
Don't bring that back.
Because that mystery has not been solved yet, I can't put it near the top. I've got Boom, which at the time was probably one of my favorite episodes of the series. Then Dot and Bubble, which was a fantastic episode as well. Really exploring that side of the Doctor at the very end of the episode. Probably the best ending of any of the episodes of the series, apart from Legend. Legend is my number 2, just for the build up. Didn't have many monsters in the episode, but had that slow build and kind of that tension running throughout, and really good kind of investigative work. Reminded me of Army of the Ghosts as an episode, and also reminded me of Utopia and all of those kind of build ups to a finale. But my number 1 for the series is 73 Yards, as it's probably one of the best standalone episodes they've had in years. I've watched it most times out of all of the episodes in the series so far. Really enjoyed it, really enjoyed the eeriness of it, and I think it showed off Millie's acting talent fantastically. So that's my ranking for the series.
Okay, well, I mean, number 1, I hate Tayte for doing this on such a split second, but I've thrown something together. Number 9 is Space Babies, and to be fair, none of these episodes I was like, this is rubbish. I mean, I like Space Babies enough. I know.
You've said that on record now.
I have. You know, it was okay. It was okay. It was fun. That's one where it's like it's more fun. I'm still that whole fairy tale-ness of it bugs me, but I mean, as a thing, fine, absolutely fine. Number 8, maybe the most controversial thing. My number 8 is 73 yards, and I don't know. I don't dig it. I don't know why. I don't dig it as much as other people have, and I can't really put my finger on why. Maybe part of it is just because it's one of those where at the end it's all done and then nothing happens. You know, the Doctor wasn't a part of it. Ruby doesn't remember, and it's like it was interesting, but then I was frustrated as a viewer because it's like I don't know how Ruby is so kind of mentally okay when I would be just terrible in the scenario that she's in. So I just didn't vibe with it, unfortunately. Number 7 is Empire of Death. You know, as a finale, it was okay at best. I don't really think it's outdone a lot of the modern Who finales. And yeah, definitely Russell T Davis's weakest for me, anyway. 6, The Church on Ruby Road, a really nice episode. Not too much to say on it. I think it, as a Christmas special, I think it does what it needs to do. Number 5 is Boom. I really like kind of the self-contained location, and again, some really great dialogue because of that. There's no kind of moving about here, there, and everywhere. They've got one problem and they need to, find a solution to it. And I think great acting all around. The Devil's Chord is number 4 for me. This is definitely more of a fun episode. Love Jinx Monsoon in it. Love that we're in the 60s. And we have a lot of fun with that. It's always a twist ending, which I do like. Number 3 is Rogue. Probably for me the most kind of Doctor Who episode of the series. For me, it's one that I could probably the episode that I would go back to the most out of this list. There's not much in the overarching things that are going on in this series. It's pretty self-contained on the whole. And of course, the relationship between Rogue and the Doctor is lovely to see, and to just kind of get that period of time. And as I've said before, any time in the past that's not in Victorian times, London is unhappy with. Number 2, Matching Tayte, is Legend of Ruby Sunday. I really like kind of the intro to this finale. It's a shame that the payoff wasn't kind of quite what we wanted, but I love the reintroduction of units and kind of this whole build up to Sutek's reveal. And then my number 1 is Dot and Bubble. As much as I would rather have an episode more with the Doctor, I think the Doctor's presence is there enough for me to warrant it being number 1. And I think the whole kind of twist with this and kind of, actually the people that we followed and maybe not necessarily the people that we would follow are the ones that we kind of shouldn't have been saved. And I know that's happened a lot in Doctor Who, where maybe the side characters or minor characters who've made it out to the end maybe not always the best characters or the most moral. And so a super strong ending with that. And just a really interesting concept overall.
Right, I kind of struggle with mine. And I do want to preface that, like, whatever's at the bottom is at the bottom, but like there is a drastic like jump in quality from the bottom spot to everything else. So I just want to preface that before people start having a go at me for like stuff's near the bottom and stuff's near the top. I like almost all the episodes bar one. So at number 9 we got the Space Babies, and it's kind of predictable at this point. It's one of those episodes where, I mean, as I was watching it, I didn't mind it, but the more it went on, I felt it got dumber, which I've never really had with a Doctor Who episode outside of Orphan 55. And it's out of all of them, it's the one I feel like revisiting the least. Like, it's a very one and done thing, and whereas that actually kind of works for some of the episodes this season, doesn't really I don't think I'll ever have the urge to want to go back and watch Space Babies for that reason. And number 8, and this is where my list kind of gets a bit all over the place compared to your two. I have The Church on Ruby Road, which I know a lot of people liked as a Christmas special. I thought it was decent. I thought it was fine. And again, that's where I want to preface that, like, the jump in quality of those 2 episodes, I'm not saying that Church on Ruby Road is bad. It's a massive step up from Space Babies. It's just, for me, I just thought it was fine, especially for a Christmas episode. And number 7, I've got The Devil's Chord. Again, this on paper, this episode I should have loved, but the end result I thought was fine. There's a lot of elements I love about it, like Jinx Monsoon, certain elements in terms of the way that music is used, but again, there's a lot of things that I also wish it could have done, and it did feel a bit like missed potential for me. Number 6, I've got Empire of Death. I think we've discussed it to an extent here, in terms of why it did and didn't work. Again, kind of missed potential. And pretty much from 5 onwards, these are episodes that I did thoroughly really like. And to be honest, 4 and 5, I did have to swap around quite a bit because I didn't know what order to put them in. But at 5, I've gone for Dot and Bubble, which was an episode that surprised me because when I first heard about it, I was like, this is probably not going to be my favourite. And then it won me over the more the episode went on. That ending still absolutely floors me, though. 4 is The Legend on Ruby Sunday. I think it has some incredible setup. Whether the payoff was good, it was up for debate. But I thought most of the setup was really good for that one. And number 3, I have Boom, which if you'd asked me a few weeks ago, this probably would have been number 1. But number 3 is Boom. It's a very great, self-contained, really well-written episode. And I think the performances especially are probably at their best in this episode, especially from Shooty and Millie. I think they really play off each other really well in this episode. And you really do. This is the first episode where you really start to see the dramatic part of Shooty's Doctor come out, and I really love that. And number 2 is Rogue. And I think similarly to what Sam said, this has the most rewatchability of any episode this series. Even though my number 1 is at number 1 for a reason, I feel like I'm going to revisit Rogue more because it's the most fun I've had with an episode this series. Like Sam said, it feels the most Doctor Who out of any episode this series. And there are just moments from it compared to other episodes this season where like they're instantly stuck in my head and make me want to go back and revisit it, either because it's something I've missed or because I just had so much enjoyment with specific elements. And number 1 is 73 Yards, because I just love the way it's written. And I mean, me and Tate kind of dissected the hell out of that one a few weeks ago, but I just love everything about that episode. And whereas some self-contained episodes of Doctor Who can kind of deteriorate over time, this one just kind of keeps getting better, especially in terms of the simple concept and its execution. And that's why it's my number 1.
So going off that, I think as far as averages are concerned, we would say probably Legend of Ruby Sunday ended up with the highest scores overall. Dot and Bubble would have been second, and then, or Rogue even would have been second as kind of a tie there. And the most polarizing out of all of them would have been 73 Yards at the top and bottom of, all
Sorry for ruining the average.
The only one that was really consistent in there was Space Babies and Last. We can all agree that it is the weakest episode of the season. We know Sam loves that episode with his dear heart, and
my number 9 place,
But anyway, thank you for that. That was proper putting you on the spot. I'm going to put both of your socials up on the screen right now because I just want to say for myself, thank you ever so much for coming on and covering all of the episodes with me across the entire season. It's been fantastic having discussions with yourselves. So. Thank you ever so much for coming on. And, always welcome on the channel to have a discussion about Doctor Who and other things and various other things. But of course, advertise yourselves as well. What's happening at the moment, Sam? And then we'll move over to Aaron.
Well, I mean, it's just this now. This is done and Acolyte right now. So we were on quite the cliffhanger last Wednesday. So she'll be back this Wednesday. I'm actually seeing George in person this weekend.
Well, there you go.
So it's going to be a little meet-up, seeing some cast members from Ahsoka. So I'm sure that'll be on the socials anyway about that. So yeah, that's the most recent things.
In terms of me, at the time of this video going out, yesterday I did my full video on Doctor Who on my channel. It compared to this talk, it's spoiler free because I'm aware there are some people that watch my channel that might not be into Doctor Who, or maybe have not seen the series yet. So I've tried to make it as spoiler free as I can while still nitpicking the hell out of it. And yeah, in terms of video content, that's really all that's coming up. In terms of personal stuff, I'm seeing Green Day on Saturday. Yes.
Oh.
And then I've got Hosier the weekend after. So
you saw Foo Fighters this week as well. You cannot be saying those things.
I've got 3 gigs in a row, and then I've got I don't think the next gig after that isn't until like the end of August. So like I've got 3 weekends and gigs, and then I'm just having the whole of July off.
Yeah. Well, brilliant. Well, we're going to throw our socials up on the screen as well. So go follow us on social media. That is the Linktree link in the description. You can follow us on all of our things on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Letterboxd, and go on to Redbubble as well to pick up a t-shirt, which I'm sweating through right now, and one of our lovely pillows in the background, which is perfect for a meltingly hot day.
For context, you can't buy the sweaty t-shirt that he's currently wearing.
You cannot buy the sweaty t-shirt that I'm wearing. You've got to buy it and then put the sweat on yourself by sitting and discussing Doctor Who for almost an hour and a half. Anyway, we also want to hear your comments below on your thoughts on the entire series of Doctor Who or your thoughts on the Empire of Death. We talked about it a lot today. Probably the longest review we've had for the entire series, but it was worth the discussion because we talked about the entire series itself and the episode itself. Really enjoyed this discussion. So we want to hear your thoughts as well. Start a conversation on the entire series as a whole. So thank you everyone for joining us throughout the entire series. Those who've been watching the videos weekly, those who have joined me on the video, you two, and also Neil included. It's been a fantastic discussion, and now we are the ones who wait. We must wait until December. Until we get the Christmas special, Joy to the World, written by Stephen Moffat, with his final ever episode of Doctor Who. I'm looking forward to it, but I wish there was at least a few more episodes to kind of tie me over. Thankfully, BBC iPlayer in the UK has every single episode of Classic Who, and also New Who, and also this series of Who. So I guess I'm going to have to keep going through that and also continue my kind of rewatch of Sarah Jane Adventures. Until then, we may have some Doctor Who content coming onto the channel every now and then, just to keep it ticking over, have some discussions about previous series, whether it's episode anniversaries or whatever. I love talking about Doctor Who on the channel, so we'll see what we can do over the summer, coming up towards kind of the run-in towards the Christmas special. But anyway, thank you ever so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.